The new Pet Sematary movie has a completely bonkers ending and makes some pretty significant changes from Stephen King's original book. But what does it do so differently? Stick around as I break down the new movie and delve into where and how it differs from the book. Obviously, I'm going to be buried in spoilers, so please check the film out and read the book, which is really great because I'll be spoiling the hell out of both of them. Right, let's get into it. Pet Sematary, both this 2019 movie version and King's 1983 novel, follows the Creed family, made up of mother and father Rachel and Lewis, and their two children Ellie and Gage. The story sees them leave city life behind and move to the wilds of Ludlow, Maine, where their new property has a sinister pet cemetery in the back garden and a dangerous road in the front. Okay, let's kick off with one of the biggest changes from the book, a change that was heavily marketed and publicised in the trailers. Ellie dies instead of Gage. So in King's original book and the 1989 version of the movie, which King also scripted, and hey look, here he is making a cameo as a minister too, Lewis is unable to save Gage in time before he gets hit by a truck on the road outside the Creed's house. But in the 2019 movie, Gage is saved at the very last minute, only for daughter Ellie, who is also on the road to greet her cat Church, to be hit and killed. And this pivotal change to the story's most iconic set piece sets the 2019 version of Pet Sematary down a largely new path. With Ellie dead, this new version speeds through some of the story beats of King's novel to get to its devastating conclusion. And in this expedited process, we get quite a few cuts from the book. Rachel's parents, for example, are largely trimmed down to just cameo roles, which means we don't get the novel's grim funeral fight between Lewis and Rachel's father.
It's your son's funeral, get hold of yourself.
It's a really gut-wrenching moment in the book, and it's kind of a shame not to see it here, but its omission lets us get to the zombie action of the finale way quicker. As per the book, Rachel heads to her parents' place after the funeral and leaves Lewis at home to wallow in his grief. / plan the resurrection of his daughter. He heads over to his neighbour Judd's for a drink and considers the option of burying Ellie in the pet cemetery in order to bring her back. Judd naturally warns against this with the book's now iconic line,
"Sometimes dead is better."
But Lewis is 2 steps ahead of Judd and drugs his drink, sending poor Judd into a deep, deep sleep. So the film diverges from King's novel in a couple of different ways in this sequence. Firstly, the 2019 movie omits Judd's warning story about Timmy Bateman, a young World War II veteran who died coming home from the war. Timmy was buried by his father in the graveyard beyond the pet cemetery, only to return as a zombie demon thing to torment the townspeople. He was finally confronted and killed by one of Judd's childhood friends. There is a blink and you'll miss it nod to Timmy in the 2019 movie though, which you can catch when Lewis is briefly looking through newspaper clippings about the pet cemetery. The second change from the book in this sequence is when Lewis drugs Judd. This doesn't happen in the novel, where it's instead implied that Judd is overcome by the supernatural power of the cemetery, which sends him to sleep against his wishes while Lewis carries out his morbid plan. The book portrays this eerie supernatural presence in the form of a Wendigo, a mythical evil spirit, but I'll get to that later. The film then continues with Lewis returning to his daughter's grave, and he exhumes Ellie and then reburies her in the graveyard beyond the pet cemetery. Ellie comes back the next morning and, well, here's where shit gets weird. In this warped new scenario, Ellie and Lewis spend quality family time together. Among other twisted examples, Lewis gives her a bath and finds that the back of her head has been stitched back together. You know, normal family stuff. Rachel, who's still at her parents', senses that something is off when little Gage starts referencing Victor Pascal, a student that died at Lewis's ER. And she heads off for home, calling Judd along the way. Eagle-eyed King fans might have noticed that she drives through Derry on the way, the town that is tormented by Pennywise the Clown in It. After speaking to Rachel, Judd checks in on Lewis, who by now is veering headfirst into insanity, and he sends Judd packing. As he's leaving, Judd, in perhaps the creepiest shot in the entire movie, sees the undead Ellie in the upstairs window. He hightails it back to his home and we get a grim update of Judd's iconic death from the book. The movie craftily plays with our expectations for the death, foreshadowing that gruesome heel stab, which in the book I think happens around here. The movie version though sees Judd make it back downstairs before falling afoul of his Achilles heel, which Ellie promptly stabs, bringing him crashing down the stairs. We're spared the gory slash across Judd's mouth that we saw back in the 1989 version, but Ellie verbally abuses poor Judd with the voice of his dead wife before killing him with the scalpel. Okay, so Rachel finally returns home, and in a sequence that never made it into the book, she is reunited with her undead daughter.
Hug your daughter. Hug your daughter.
Like any sane person, she is instantly horrified and tries to escape with Gage. Rachel manages to get Gage to safety, only to be killed by Ellie, who then knocks Lewis out and drags Rachel off to the Pet Sematary to resurrect her. Lewis wakes up and heads off after his daughter to kill her, and as he's about to bring down the killing blow, he hesitates. And in this moment, the undead Rachel impales him using a grave marker. The film then ends in a seriously deranged way, with the 3 undead family members returning to Gage, presumably with the intention to murder him and bring him back as an undead as well. Yes, pretty dark.
Sometimes dead is better.
Yeah, you can say that again, Judd. So aside from that central change from Gage to Ellie, it's this third act that deviates the most from King's original novel. A lot of the major beats, including Judd's gory fate, are the same, but the book's finale plays out in a wholly different manner. In the novel, Rachel returns home alone and immediately heads over to Judd's place, where she is killed by Gage, who in the 1989 film version was dressed as a weird child magician, I think?
Oh, Gage.
Stay away from him, Rachel, that shit is just weird. Either way, Lewis then wakes up the following morning and follows Gage's muddy footprints over to Judd's house with a syringe full of lethal drugs to kill his undead son. He encounters the dead bodies of both his wife and his neighbour, kills the demon Gage, and in a final moment of madness, he drags his wife's dead body and buries her in a grave beyond the Pet Sematary. And the book ends with a zombified Rachel returning to Lewis, raspily whispering, "Darling," which sent literal shivers down my spine the first time I read it. Obviously, there is a lot to unpack from the movie's devastating conclusion, which expands greatly on the blueprints of King's original story. While the film doesn't offer as unflinching a portrayal of grief as the novel does, it really delves into the different ways that people treat and accept death. Each character represents a different angle or perspective on the topic of mortality. Lewis, as a doctor, is coldly indifferent to the concept of death, which might give us a reason as to why he's so open to the idea of bringing Ellie back from the dead. Whereas Rachel is terrified of the concept of death, having been scarred by her ordeal with her sick sister when she was young. And this might give us insight into why she is so horrified by Ellie's return during the movie's finale.
Are you happy, Mommy?
I briefly touched on it there, but another element to be changed from King's novel is the fate of Rachel's sister Zelda. Zelda suffers from spinal meningitis in both the book and the film, but with one major element changed: her death. In the book, Rachel brings Zelda some food and witnesses her choking while she succumbs to her illness. But in the movie, Rachel is too scared to bring Zelda her food and instead sends it up in a broken dumbwaiter. Naturally, the dumbwaiter gets stuck, and Zelda attempts to climb in and get her food, but falls and dies in the claustrophobic interior. While this doesn't really have any major impact on the plot of the movie, it does give us one of the film's best jump scares, when Rachel hallucinates the incident in her bathroom cabinet. While Judd does reference the Wendigo when regaling the history of the Pet Sematary, the film largely cuts out the Wendigo's physical and spiritual presence. In the book, those that are brought back to life by the Pet Sematary are possessed by the dark spirit of the Wendigo, who holds a sort of omniscient power.
Those woods belong to something else.
That explains why Ellie is able to channel the spirit of Judd's dead wife in the movie, as she is possessed with the Wendigo's all-knowing power. We get another instance of this in the book when the undead Timmy Baterman reveals dark secrets that he couldn't possibly know to the men that have come to kill him. Lewis actually sees the Wendigo in the book as well, when he's en route to burying his son. The Wendigo lets him pass undisturbed though, as it can sense exactly what he is about to do. Like the 1989 movie before it, the 2019 version of Pet Sematary does away with Judd's poor wife Norma. In the book, Norma is a kindly old lady who forms a bond with the Creed children. She suffers a near-fatal heart attack but is tended back to health by Lewis. She eventually passes away around the midpoint of the book, and her death prompts Rachel to open up about her horrifying experience with Zelda's death. In the film, she's already dead before the events of the movie though, but we do see her when the Ellie demon impersonates her and abuses Judd with the voice of his dead wife. The film, while not as good as King's novel in my opinion, is still a whole load of fun. But let me know your thoughts on it in the comments section below, and I will catch you next time.